Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when and where you are, and welcome to another Festival in a Box 3.0 session. This is the Kingsbarns Balcomie session, so this is exciting new bottling from our friends at Kingsbarns. And I'm delighted to say that we have Business Development Manager Kirsten Webb joining us, directly from the distillery, no less. So I'm going to bring Kirsten in now. Good
Hi,
afternoon,
Eddie. Hi,
Kirsten.
everyone.
How are you?
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well. I'm looking at this lovely shrine of whiskey behind you.
Yes, it's not my home. It's not my living room, unfortunately. I wish it was.
Does it not feel like you live there?
Well, to be fair, I actually live just down the road, like less than a mile away. So I pretty much live here, yes. But you
Oh,
know what?
right,
It's not a bad neighbour to have as a distillery.
okay. So you're a local to the distillery then?
I am, yeah, and that's what really got me into wanting to be part of this industry in the first place. Really, was I drove past every day. I would visit as a customer, and I was just so intrigued and kind of just really amazed by the distillery. And it's such a big part of the community that I really wanted to be part of that myself. So that's a little bit of how I got into, I guess, working here. It's my kind of love for the community and the distillery itself, because it does give back a lot to the community, which I really love. And before I started my role as a business development manager, which is what I do today. I was actually a tour guide here for around about 2 years beforehand, before I moved into more of the kind of ambassador kind of role that I do now, traveling up and down Scotland, promoting our brands and our whiskey.
Fantastic, yes. So you've gone in right from the very beginning, and then here you are
Yeah.
in a lofty role. Well, that's brilliant to hear. It's good to see so many young people in whiskey as well. I used to be young a long time ago.
You still are.
Underneath the beard somewhere I am. So listen, you have very kindly donated the Kingsbarns Balcomie,
Yeah.
which is new to me. I've not tasted this yet. I'm very excited to
Oh,
taste it.
wow. Oh, what a great
So
time to start.
I know. Well, I thought I'd save myself for this session, as tempting as it was to have a little preview dram. But I thought, no, I'm going to control myself and open the bottle here on the screen. Well, actually, the
Amazing.
bottle has been opened. It looks like I have had a dram out of it, but I promise that wasn't me. And yeah, so while I'm pouring myself a bit, would you mind telling us a bit more about the Balcomie?
Yeah, of course. So the Balcomie is a relatively new release for us, but I guess we released it in November of last year, so it's been out for around a year now. We released it just during the midst of one of the last lockdowns, so a bit of a crazy time for us all, but it's really hit the ground running in terms of a release for us, and it's getting some really strong feedback across the board, which is what I completely love. The Balcomie is completely new ground for us, and we are quite a young distillery here at Kingsbarns. So we actually filled our very first cask in March 2015. And what the Balcomie is really an evolution of our flagship malt, which is our Kingsbarns Ginger Dram, which you might have had a chance to taste before. And with Kingsbarns Ginger Dram, what we really have done is established our Kingsbarns style, which is very typical of the Lowland region, which we're situated in. Our distillery is based just around 10 minutes from St Andrews, which is the home of golf, of course. So we get a lot of thirsty golfers in through our doors, especially in the summer months. But at Kingsbarns, we're really looking to create that light, fruity, sweet style. And so what I love about the Balcomie is it's our very first time that we've ever released a whiskey that's 100% Oloroso sherry cask matured, and that's in American oak barrels. But what I love about it is it's not your typical sherry bombs. People see 100% sherry matured and think, oh my gosh, it's going to be really kind of punchy, bold. But what it is, it's really a balance between the spirit and the wood. So you're getting a really nice mixture of our very kind of light, fruity style of spirit, but also a really nice kind of touch of richness in there as well. The barrels that we've used for this release that have been used in the Solera system in Jerez in Spain for decades. So what that does is when the spirit, the sherry, has been maturing in this wood for all these years, the sherry is actually taking away some of the more bitter elements of the wood, those kind of more tannic notes. So what we're left with is actually a really mellow wood to mature our spirit in. And that what it does is it really nurtures the spirit, I find, rather than overpowers it, because it was really important for us to still get that Kingsbarns signature style through as we're still establishing ourselves as quite a new distillery, if that makes sense.
I'll try unmuting myself. Yes, I was totally agreeing. It's got a real Well, I haven't tasted it yet, but it's a real punchy nose to it.
Here.
Oh, well done. Good. I was
I did
wondering.
a pre-poured. I'm not driving, so that's good as well.
Good, yeah.
Still close by.
Never dram and drive.
Never do. But I guess, let's get into some of the tasting notes then. So on the nose of this dram, I feel personally, it's like you're getting those kind of like cinnamon honey notes coming forward, a little bit of treacle on the nose there as well. It's really kind of rich and sweet, and that's coming from a lot of you. If you've ever had the chance to interact with our new make spirit before, which I've got some here, our new make spirit that we actually release and sell at the distillery, it's got so many rich fruit berry notes to it, and I feel like that really does come through in our Kingsbarns Balcomie, so we've not lost that style. So that's where a lot of the fruitiness is coming from. And then when you get to the palate, lots of, I know that the kind of traditional kind of sherry cake spice coming forward, but I feel up front you get a lot of kind of tropical notes, kind of like, that kind of rich tinned pineapple almost, which I think is absolutely delicious. And some sultana is kind of niggling in there as well. But for me, like a little bit of kind of dark chocolate and espresso, it's quite a complex jam. And in the finish, you're going to get some lovely kind of roasted hazelnuts lingering in the background as well. But it's really, really kind of delicate, also sweet and rich, which is what I kind of love about it. It's kind of like a juxtaposition almost between different complexities.
It's kind of bittersweet on the finish, which reminds me of my current favorite trashy chocolate, which is Terry's chocolate orange.
Love it.
And I think I can just imagine enjoying a dram of this with most of a chocolate orange.
That's actually a really good point, actually, because I feel like there's lots of kind of like orange rindy notes lingering in the whiskey, and with that kind of bitter chocolate finish as well, it would pair really nicely with a lovely chocolate orange. I can see it working well.
Yeah, I'll send you the invoice later for that. No, it's really what about adding water to it? Is that something you'd recommend?
Well, this whiskey is sitting at 46% ABV. So what I would always recommend is tasting it neat first, because it's still got a slightly higher ABV than normal. So you're still going to get those, it's slightly richer in terms of mouthfeel and alcohol oils present. I personally don't add water to this one, but please feel free to add water. I normally add water I always find we release our distillery reserve this month. And with that one, because that's cast strength, a little bit of water just really softens out a little bit. I feel with this one, I don't prefer it with water, but have you added some water yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, sorry.
No, of course. It's up to you how you enjoy it.
No, to be transparent with you, I've been adding water to every whiskey throughout these tastings, just to create a level playing field. Well,
and of course, because that way, so you're gonna pick up different notes in the dram as well, like little kind of like lingering, delicate flavors that come through stronger now, I feel.
Yeah, that's right. Well, some of the fruitier overtones are starting to come out now, which is really nice, actually. I'm going to taste it as well.
A good point about this whiskey too, I find, is its natural colour. So we've not added any caramel to it, and it's also non-chill filtered as well. So I feel like when you give the whiskey a lovely swirl in your glass, it's really sticky. It almost clings to the glass almost, because those rich oils are still present in the dram, which is amazing.
Yeah. No, it's always a good point, and something that we talk to folks about is the don't necessarily not buy whiskies because it's not chill filtered, or is chill filtered, but it's something to consider. And certainly from a texture point of view, a non-chill filtered whiskey can certainly give you a lot more oiliness and texture.
Completely agree. I think the finish is a little bit kind of richer almost, I find, with a non-chill filtered whiskey.
Lovely. So that's fully Oloroso sherry casked Kingsbarns. And now, I think you mentioned Kingsbarns is relatively young. I mean, obviously there seems to be a distillery opening every day somewhere in the world at the moment. But I would say you're kind of young, but not the youngest. And you're now 6 years in, nearly 7 years.
Well, our 7th birthday was in November, so it's St Andrew's Day. Because what we did was we filled our first cask in March 2015, but our visitor centre opened in 2014. So we were still producing spirit at that time, but it's not filling any cask yet. So our official birthday, we like to call it, is November this last month, the 7th birthday. So really looking forward. It feels amazing now that we're getting to a stage where we can think about our 7-year-old release, which is fantastic that we're actually finally here.
No, it's great. It's great. It's good to see the progress. I mean, I really loved the Dream to Dram bottling. I think it was a really cracking first whiskey to release, and this is very lovely too. Now, there may be some people watching who've not heard of Kingsbarns or of the Weems family as well, and so would you mind just taking us through? I know it's a fairly short history, so it might not take too long in terms of the distillery, but obviously the Weems family and their involvement in various alcohols goes back a lot longer. So are you able to just take us through a bit about them?
100%. So, although we're talking about Kingsbarns Distillery today, primarily, I work for Weems Family Spirits. So the Weems family, they are a family of entrepreneurs that can trace their roots back in Fife to as far back as the 1300s. So they've got a lot of history, especially in this lovely little corner of Scotland where we live in. One of their first kind of entrepreneurs was the coal mines. We've got a kind of a really rich history in coal mines around about this area where we live. So that's where they made a lot of their money, and that's where their ancestral home still lies, and their cousins still live in to this very day. But they've also got so many other business interests. So they've got like a Kingan tea plant, they've got a winery in the Provence of France, they've got an avocado and sheep farm in Australia, a hydro company, they do things in properties too. So lots of different strings to their bow, 100%. But they really got into spirits in the 1970s. And that was when William and Isabella Weems, who head up the Weems enterprises today, well, William was out in France, and he was selling our French wine to all the cavistes and independent retailers out in France or in the Provence, where the wineries are. And these cavistes, they would ask William all about his whiskey knowledge, and they'd ask him for recommendations on whiskey for him. And they'd say, William, you're Scottish, you live in Scotland. Why are you selling wine, French wine, and not Scottish whiskey? And he was like, it's actually a very good point. And he realised there was a bit of a gap in the market there, because these guys were already so enthused in his knowledge as it was. So he thought, well, let's do this. So 15 years ago, he started Weems Malt. And that's where we've got our collection of independent bottlers. So we don't own a distillery for these. What Isabella will do, William's sister, is she'll visit all the distilleries all around Scotland and handpick these casks and purchase them. And then we'll bottle them and sell them under our own name. So we release a range of single casks each year, which are absolutely stunning whiskies. And we also release our blended malt range as well. So that's where we've got the Hive, the Spice King, and the Peat Chimney. But then we decided to delve a little bit further into kind of widen our spirit category. And 10 years ago, we started Darnley's Gin. And our Darnley's Gin Cottage is literally just next door to the Kingsbarns Distillery where we are today. And that's where we make lovely London dry gins. And we always try, and it's very small batch, nature distilled, and it's a real focus on flavour there at Darnley's. But I guess a little bit of history then into Kingsbarns. So as I said, and I've mentioned, touched upon, we are a young distillery. But the dream of the distillery really came about in 2008, and that was from a golf caddy called Douglas Clement. And that's where the name of our first release flagship malt, Dream to Dram, comes from, is actually from our founder, Doug. So Dream to Dram is the name of our first release here, which we released around about 3 years ago now. And for the past 2 years, it's actually won Best Lowland Scotch at the World Whisky Awards, 2 years running. So it's an amazing achievement from the distillery and the team. But essentially back to Doug. So Doug works at Kingsbarns Golf Course, which is the golf course, very famous, that you can see literally almost from like the car park of our distillery. It's a gorgeous view from where we're standing. And so he'd have golfers come from all over the world to play with him at Kingsbarns Golf Course. From the likes of Europe, Asia, especially Americans love it over here as well. And when you come to Scotland for golf, you also come for whiskey. It kind of comes hand in hand. So these golfers would say, Doug, whiskey, the gin's great. Sorry, the golf's great here, but where's the nearest whiskey distillery? We really want a dram. And the nearest distillery at that time was probably the likes of maybe Glenkinchie, just past Edinburgh, or maybe kind of north at Lothray, Blair Athol way. So we found a really big gap in the market for a local Fife distillery. So it took many years of raising the funds and the awareness, and we eventually found this building, which we're situated in now. It's a beautiful 18th century, and at that time it was a derelict farmsteading. So a lot of work was needed done to the building, and eventually he got a grant from the EU from £670,000, and then that money helped bring on board the Weems family, especially William Weems. Because he was already invested in, we had Weems malts, it kind of seemed natural for the next progression of Weems family spirits to then be our own Fife whiskey distillery. So that's kind of where we come from in terms of our history, which is, our founding member, Doug Clement, and a little bit about Weems family spirits there as well.
Brilliant. Well, you managed to get an awful lot into a very short space of time. So well done.
No
Apologies for the video reception, everyone. Obviously, the Wi-Fi is struggling to keep up with the content, but hopefully it's not detracting from the enjoyment of the chat and the whiskey. Now, obviously, we've talked a bit about the specifics of this particular whiskey. Now, Kingsbarns is a traditional single malt distillery, so it's a one pair of stills, right? Or is it
Yes.
more than that?
No, so I guess the kind of quirks that make Kingsbarns, we've got a few kind of quirks involved. So you mentioned the stills. So yes, it's traditional double pot copper still distillation, and we've got handcrafted stills from Forsyths up in Speyside. They are very small stills. So for example, our spirit still is only 4,500 litres, but we run these stills very slowly. Essentially, we want to capture only the lightest elements and flavours of the spirit. So we promote lots of reflux, we run the stills slowly, and we have a very long line arm as well, and very high cut points. So we only capture the very lightest part of the run, as I mentioned. So that all helps us give us that kind of lighter, fruitier, lowland style of new make spirit. A few other little quirks as well is that we use 2 different strains of yeasts for our fermentation process, which is quite unusual for a whiskey distillery. So the main reason behind this is that we really wanted, like I mentioned, to promote the really fruity most elements into our wash and finally into our spirit, because the wash and what you create during fermentation, when you then distill in your stills, you're only condensing the flavors you already have. So it's super important that the wash you create is as flavorful and as best quality as possible. So the 2 yeasts that we use, it's a 50-50 mix of both. The first one is Anchor, which is an American yeast. Both of them, by the way, are distiller's yeast. So we don't use any brewer's yeast at all. And they're all in dried form that we use them as well. So Anchor, that American yeast that we use, it's kind of like your bread and butter yeast in the distilling world. It's very reliable, and you know what you're going to get when you use it. And lots of distilleries in Scotland use it because it gives you lots of bang for your buck. So you get a really great yield from using Anchor yeast. It's very hungry, so it creates a lot of spirit. The second yeast that we use is a little bit more kind of niche and quirky and indie, and it's called Fermentis, and it's a French yeast. And this French yeast, I wouldn't say you'd use it by yourself because it's a bit of a lazier yeast, but it gives you really great flavour. But if you were to use it by itself, you wouldn't get the great alcohol yield that you need. So using that 50-50 each of both, we're going to get the really great, intense, fruity flavours, but also the yield you need as well to make it worth your while. So these 2 yeasts, 50-50 mix of both, 7 kilograms in total. But we are a very small distillery at Kingsbarns too. So we produce just over 200,000 litres of pure alcohol a year. And that's what some of the big distilleries can do in a day pretty much. So very small. We do 7 batches a week over 5 days. So the distillers get the weekend off. So they're very lucky guys. So that kind of equates to about 34 barrels a week that we fill at the distillery. So maybe kind of 4 or 5 barrels a day that we fill. And that's a big part of who we are, our kind of small family run, kind of nice homely feel to the distillery. Again, with Kingsbarns, and one of the things I absolutely love about our distillery, and being local, it means a lot to me as well, is that we use 100% local Fife barley as part of our raw materials. So we source this from local farmers. We don't source any of it from far away, because as you may or may not know, in Scotland, you can source your barley for your distillery from England, from France, from the Netherlands, even as far as Australia. But it was really important for us to keep that local aspect to it and really give back to the community as well. So our barley is a local from Fife. We distill in Fife as well, we mature in Fife, and we bottle in Fife. So that's kind of what I really love, is that we're really heavily involved in the locality and the community of Fife, giving our spirit an anchor to the land per se.
Brilliant. Also interesting. I must say, I was close to the distillery earlier this year, but I was driving down from Dornoch, and we just I was with my family and they just wouldn't get a move on. You know? I'm kidding. It was all my fault. And so we arrived in the area too late to come and see you. But I think you guys have a great visitor centre from all accounts, so people can come and visit you, right?
Yes, 100%. So we're actually open 7 days a week, and we run tours throughout the day. So in the summer, our whiskey tours run pretty much on the hour every hour. In the winter, it's a little bit pared back, so we do kind of 3 a day. And we also, as I mentioned previously, we've got our Darnley Gin Cottage next door, where we also conduct gin tours every day as well. So there's literally something for everyone. So if you've got a larger party and someone wants to go and do a gin tour, someone wants to do a whiskey tour, we can accommodate for all that. We also have a cafe on site too, and some great walks in the area as well. Great for dog walking, and we're very dog friendly at the distillery too, which is another reason why.
Very good. Now, in terms of future bottlings and developments, I mean, obviously you're not going to be expanding the distillery just yet, given that you've only really just started distilling 6 years ago. But so is there anything exciting on the horizon that you're able to give us a little hint or preview of?
This is where I could get in trouble. No one tells me anything anymore. I used to be too much. I need to talk too much on my tour, so they probably keep it all quiet for me now.
Oh, really?
But we've got a filling plan for the next 20 years. So we are looking very much long term at the distillery. Pretty much 90% or kind of 85%, I'd say, is what we fill at the distillery is ex-bourbon first fill barrels from Kentucky. So a lot of our spirit goes into these ex-bourbon barrels. The rest we fill into ex-oil sherry casks that were tasted today. We do a lot of kind of Portuguese wine barriques as well, and experimental casks too. So we've filled quite a few experimental casks. One that I can probably talk to you about and may get released soon is that obviously being a lowland distillery, we can, but we don't use any peat in our production process. But what we've done is we've filled some of our lowland fruity spirit into ex-Isla casks. So it's one day soon, hopefully, there will be a release where you actually get a very delicate, peaty, kind of nuanced smoke element into a release of ours. And I have managed to taste some, and it's absolutely delicious. So I would keep your eyes peeled on our direct channels for that one.
I will do. I will do. Now, the question I'm going to ask, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, because I don't know Peter really well, but I feel I know him well enough to know the answer to it. Has he considered, or have you guys considered using peated malted barley?
We have considered it, but it's not on our radar at the moment. I think because we really want to establish our distillery style, like I've mentioned, it being that very lowland, light and fruity. And I think once we establish that and are known for that, then we can do a few little kind of quirks and things like that too, like kind of different kind of releases. But I think we want to be known and make a name for ourselves doing what we do. And then once we've got that, then we can talk about doing other things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes absolute sense. And also it's dirty stuff anyway, isn't it? You know, peated barley. It makes a hell of a stink of the stills.
Well, yeah, I think it takes a long time to actually not kind of flush it out, if that makes sense. Well, so it lingers for a long time. So if we did do it, we want to create a consistent spirit as possible. It would kind of wreak havoc on our consistency a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I mean, those distilleries that do it have to go through, several weeks of cleaning and, like you say, flushing it through to get it back to the way it was beforehand. So it's it is a hell of a commitment. And I think, like you say, it's about, with you guys, it is about establishing the character of the whiskey and having people associate the character with the distillery. So definitely. I think you're absolutely right. Great. Well, in terms of, I mean, obviously, you must be a keen whiskey drinker. So I'm wondering, do you follow developments in the whiskey world aside from what's happening, in Kingsbarns? I'm sure you do. And if you do, assuming you do, is there anything that really excites you, or is there anything that you've heard about that excites you?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time for the whiskey industry as a whole. What I do love is because we're such a Fife kind of owned and operated distillery. Fife's almost like its little mini region at the moment. We have so many amazing distilleries kind of popping up, and we're kind of one of the first in a landmark distillery to do it. But we've got the likes of Eden Mill, which is another local distillery just outside St Andrews. You've got Daft Mill as well, which is a lovely kind of farm, family-run distillery. You've got kind of Rosebank that's opening up later on this year as well. Linder's Abbey just released their very first single malt release too. And I like how everyone's got that, and it's like a family feel to it almost. Like when Lindor's released their first whiskey, they actually sent us a bottle to the distillery. And things like that are things that I really love. And it's that kind of Fife feel to it and making a name for ourselves, because before when you say, oh, we're a lowland distillery, people, oh, that's a bit boring perhaps. It never really excited people, whereas now I feel everyone's talking about the lowlands more and more, and we're really kind of shouting about how much of a great quality spirit we're producing down in Fife and down in the lowlands of Scotland where we are, because this region has been known for such a long time as producing the very best barley in Scotland for the industry. So if we're producing the very best barley, because we've got those kind of the great conditions for it, the climate, it's almost like a climate here in Fife. We've got those kind of long summer hours and that kind of lovely kind of dry autumn winds, very little rain, well, considering it's Scotland. So it's like those weaknesses growing barley. So why not have great whiskey distilleries too? So that's what I'm a big champion for Fife, 100%, and what we're doing down here.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, when I first got into whiskey in the 1990s, you literally had Auchentoshan and Glenkinchie,
yeah,
the odd bottle of Rosebank, and it for so long the lowlands was, in not doldrums, but it was kind of the also ran, which I would, I think it's just a bit unfair, and it's great to see yourselves and the others that you mentioned, championing the region, not just Scotland as a whole. So yeah, that for me is one of the exciting developments at the moment, is the revolution of lowland single malt whiskey. So that's great to hear. Now listen, really appreciate the time you've spent to come on and talk to us today, but I must ask you another very important question before you go, which is, what other tipple do you like aside from whiskey? So what will you be drinking at Christmas and beyond, apart from whiskey?
This is a difficult one. Or actually, maybe not so much. I genuinely do love whiskey. So whiskey's probably my number one choice. I always get a bottle for Christmas from my fiance. So he always buys me a really good bottle of whiskey. So I'm looking forward to opening what's under the tree this year. But in terms of something a bit different, so I live in Crail, and our neighbouring town is Anstruther. And over summer, Scotland's very first cider shop opened up. And I must say that cider was never something that I really looked into before. I mean, remember when I was younger, you'd drink kind of like your Bulmers and your Magners, but it was never ever anything exciting. So when I visited the shop for the first time, I had quite low expectations, but I visited because it was a lovely kind of family had opened it up, and it's family run and operated, which is what I love. To love that kind of local feel. So I went in, and it's absolutely amazing. It's artisan, local small producers, all producing great quality cider and perries. And what I love about it is it's done in very small batches. So you'll buy a bottle 1 week, and then you go back next week for your next bottle because you enjoyed it so much and it's gone, because it's that small. You're only getting like kind of 6 bottles at a time. And it's a little bit like I find drinking wine as well. I drink it in a wine glass with lots of ice, and it's really light and refreshing. And with actually, it pairs really well with our Kingsbarns jam, because our Kingsbarns jam has those kind of apple, fresh fruit, tropical notes, and you get that in a lot of these ciders as well. So it's great pairings for whiskey too. The shop's called Able, in case anyone wants to look it up, and it's really awesome for kind of very kind of bespoke, different kind of kinds of ciders and things like that.
Oh, so another local producer. So you're all about eating and drinking local, by the sounds of it. Which is to be applauded, to be honest. Well, that's great. Well, listen, Kirsten, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you, and
you too.
And thank you for providing the Balcomie, which is really delicious, and may be finding its way back to my house for a meeting or two. But listen, thanks once again. I'm going to Slanjavar. Have a great Christmas and beyond. And
You too.
we'll hopefully see you guys at one of our events in the coming year, or coming years rather, because it's been a little while since you guys were there, but we'd love to have you back.
Yeah, we're looking forward to taking part 100%. And Eddie, have a great Christmas and New Year, and everyone watching too. I really wish you all the best for 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. Slán bar.
Slange.